interesting to me that you yourself, as a white European, find that when people of color talk about race, that you believe is racializing conversations. But when people like you fixate on, well, Barack Obama was a black president, why don't you object to that? That is racializing a conversation about the former president of the United States.
Hey everybody, welcome back to The Blue Lens. I've got another interesting one for you today. On the surface, this looks like a straightforward interview between Piers Morgan and Joy Reid. But the longer you watch, the more it starts to feel like something else. Because instead of exploring her views or giving her room to explain them, the conversation keeps drifting toward old controversies, loaded questions, and moments designed to put her on the defensive. Now, whether you agree with Joy Reid or not, there's a bigger issue here that's worth talking about. What should a real interview look like? Is the goal to understand someone's position, or is the goal to create a viral confrontation? Those are two very different things. And once you recognize the difference, you start watching these media interviews through a completely different lens. That's exactly what we're going to break down today. We'll look at the arguments, we'll look at the tactics, and we'll talk about why some of these exchanges generate so much attention online. So if you enjoy political commentary that goes beyond the clips and gets into what these moments really reveal, hit that like button, subscribe to The Blue Lens, and join the conversation. All right, let's get into it.
Now, look, you're perfectly entitled to be proud of your show. Many people enjoyed your show for many years. A lot of people at NBC were briefing that the reason was declining ratings post the election, a 47% decrease in your election, in ratings from pre-election. But you told Mark Lamont Hill on his show this.
After I said on my show that the reason Americans could relate to Ukrainians in a way that they didn't relate to Palestinians, that Ukrainians are white. And so watching white people get their schools bombed was, hit different. That hit our ratings. I mean, it definitely, we could see the loss of white viewers from that moment that I said that. So they were like, we don't like the name calling. And also I'm a black woman. So, I mean, I'm sure it makes him angrier, when I say things. Maybe because I am a global South person myself, I mean, as a black person, we have a different empathy toward other global South people when they are suffering. And so we're going to come at that story from a different angle and in a different way and with different kinds of empathies. And I think that's not always received very well in the news business.
Now, Joy, I mean, look, let's be honest. I don't think you were fired after all those years because of your skin color or because you're a black woman. I think you were fired because your show just got increasingly unpopular. It happens all the time in TV. That's why you got let go. Why play the race card?
First of all, I love the fact that your play the race card is your version of the race card. You literally are so fixated on trying to racialize conversations with me, Piers, I find it actually quite charming.
You racialize more conversations in your tenure at MSNBC than any host in history.
All right, Mark. All right, Piers. And the bottom line is you take an entire conversation that I had with Mark Lamont Hill and pick the bits that you can racialize because this is your shtick. And I get that this is your shtick.
You racialize everything, Joy. Come on.
I get it. I understand this is your shtick, Piers. And listen, game recognizes the game. I get this is your game.
It's not my shtick.
And the bottom line,
it was your shtick.
It is your shtick. And everyone knows that it is. It was your shtick. Piers, we understand what it is. And it is so interesting to me that you yourself, as a white European, find that when people of color talk about race, that you believe is racializing conversations. But when people like you fixate on, well, Barack Obama was a black president, why don't you object to that? That is racializing a conversation about the former president of the United States. But you can't put your, and I'm sure you find that charming and funny.
I find it hilarious because you're the one. You're the one who said Donald Trump.
You and your friend Donald Trump.
You said Donald Trump is a white fascist.
Are so he is a well. I agree with Mark
when Obama did the same thing,
last time I checked,
I'm not allowed to mention his skin color.
I agree with his former chief of staff, who last I checked was not black and said he's fascist. And Mark Milley said he's fascist to the core. Okay. So I happen to agree, and I know this is what it's important to you, with two very white gentlemen about Donald Trump's fascist tendencies. Okay. If that makes you sad and uncomfortable, I can't help you.
No, it doesn't make me sad and uncomfortable. I think it makes you a little bit of a hypocrite, but that's different. Now, President Trump reacted to your departure by saying, Low-life chairman of Comcast, Brian Roberts, the owner of ratings-challenged NBC and MSNBC, has finally gotten the nerve up to fire one of the least talented people in television, the mentally obnoxious racist Joy Reid, based on her ratings, which were virtually non-existent. Should have been canned long ago, along with everyone else who works there. What's your response to that?
It's fascinating to me that you think it's important that I care what Donald Trump says about me. It's a badge of honor. If he dislikes me, then I think I'm doing something right. I have zero respect for Donald Trump. And therefore, if he feels the same way about me, then the feelings are quite mutual. And I'm very, very proud of that and happy with it.
Okay. I want to play a clip. This is you talking about, you attacking parents. You spoke out about their concerns about gay and paedophilia pornography books being placed in school libraries.
The question I'm asking is, what is the expertise that you have and other Moms for Liberty advocates have to decide that a book, an award-winning book like All Boys Aren't Blue, isn't appropriate for students to read? What is your expertise?
What a tragic story of a young man who's anally raped by his adult family member. So you have incest, rape, pedophilia. Joy, you said you'd let me answer, so I'm going to answer
Please
for you. In what context is a strap-on dildo acceptable for public school? That's my question to you. Tell me what the context around the strap-on dildo or the rape of a minor child by a teacher.
Hold on a second.
No, we're talking about public school.
One moment.
All right.
Now, there's also a second clip. This is you talking about Republicans exploiting concerns by minors who identify as transgender. And you said this was an old age tradition which Nazi Germany did. Let's take a look.
In fact, there are more kids who have been exposed to gun violence, estimated at 3 million, than there are transgender Americans of all ages in total. Targeting trans people isn't new. It is an age-old tradition, which Nazi Germany did with brutally violent ends in the 1930s.
Now, the confusing part of all this, Joy, is what you really think about the LGBTQ plus, whatever it now is, community, right? Because as you know, when you started commentating about this, appearing to be a big ally, a lot of stuff emerged which came from posts that you had purportedly put up in a blog between 2007 and 2009, one of which said, most straight people cringe at the sight of two men kissing. Another said, I don't want to watch the two male characters in Brokeback Mountain. You were talking about having sex. Does that make me homophobic? Probably. You referred to the then Florida governor as Miss Charlie and featured the tag gay politicians. Now, you said at the time when all this emerged, I genuinely don't believe I wrote those hateful things because they're completely alien to me. I hired cybersecurity experts to see if somebody manipulated my words on my former blog. And the reality is they've not been able to prove it. Now you're not at MSNBC. Now you're on your own, doing your own thing, and you don't have to worry about repercussions and stuff. Are you prepared to finally come clean and just admit that was your blog and you did say those things?
You know, Piers, I might have known that you would use this opportunity and interview and that this was your purpose, right? This is your purpose. And that's fine. This is your show and you can do whatever you like. You know, I could sit here and go on and fight with you about your strange, weird obsession with Meghan Markle, but I won't do that because that would be rude. But what I will say is,
if you want to.
We can do that as well.
Sure.
But the point being that I was very open with my employer at the time about what happened with that old site, which I stopped writing before I even came back into the NBC family.
And now we get to the real reason this whole sit-down existed. Watch the pivot. The host suddenly wants to relitigate a blog from nearly 2 decades ago, and Joyce sees the play immediately. She tells him she had a feeling this was the entire purpose of the invitation, and you can feel the air change. Because she is right. This was never a conversation. It was an ambush dressed up as an interview. What I respect is that she does not flinch and she does not grovel. Instead, she turns the mirror around. Joy brings up his own strange, long-running fixation on a certain duchess, and she does it with a smile. She is basically saying, you want to talk about obsessions and old grudges, we can absolutely do that, but let us be honest about who in this room is fixated on what. That is the move of someone who knows exactly where this is going before it gets there. And here is what people at home need to understand. There is a massive double standard in how these interviews get run. A black woman is asked to come clean, to confess, to perform regret on command over material she has openly said she does not believe came from her. Meanwhile, the man asking the questions gets to carry his own public grudges, and nobody demands he come clean about anything. The pressure only ever flows one direction. She also makes a point that quietly dismantles the whole gotcha. Joy says she was upfront with her employer about that old site long before any of this resurfaced. So the big confession he was building toward was never actually a secret. The only thing new here is the host trying to squeeze a viral moment out of something handled years ago. That is what makes her so effective. She does not let the format control her. She walks in knowing the game. She names it out loud, and she refuses to play the apologetic guest who is supposed to shrink. Calm, sharp, and completely unbothered. That is how you handle an ambush. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.
All right, now that you've seen the exchange, let's talk about what was really happening here. Because this wasn't just an interview. It was a battle over who got to control the frame of the conversation. And that's important. Whoever controls the frame usually controls how the audience interprets everything that follows. From the very beginning, Piers Morgan wasn't simply asking Joy Reid to explain her views. He was challenging her credibility. That's a legitimate thing for an interviewer to do. Public figures should expect tough questions. But there's a difference between testing someone's arguments and repeatedly steering the conversation back to the same set of controversies until everything else disappears. That's what stood out to me. Take the discussion about race. One of Joy Reid's strongest moments came when she pointed out something that often gets overlooked. Talking about race, and isn't the same thing as reducing everything to race. America has a long history where race has shaped politics, media, education, housing, voting rights, criminal justice, and countless other issues. Ignoring that history doesn't make it disappear. At the same time, bringing it up doesn't automatically mean someone is playing the race card. That phrase gets thrown around so often that it's become a shortcut for dismissing uncomfortable conversations before they even begin. Now, that doesn't mean every argument about race is automatically correct. Of course not. Ideas should still be challenged. Evidence still matters. Facts still matter. But dismissing a discussion simply because race enters the conversation isn't a serious response. It's an escape hatch. Another thing I noticed was how quickly the interview shifted from current issues to decades-old controversies. Again, asking about someone's past isn't unfair. Journalists should ask difficult questions, but context matters. If an issue has already been publicly discussed, addressed with an employer, and debated for years, then the question becomes, are we trying to learn something new, or are we simply reopening an old controversy because we know it generates clicks? Those aren't the same thing. And that's where modern political media often loses credibility. Too many interviews are designed around moments that will trend online. The incentive isn't always clarity. Sometimes it's conflict. Sometimes it's outrage. Sometimes it's creating a clip that gets shared millions of times because two people are yelling at each other. That's entertaining, but it doesn't always make viewers more informed. One exchange that really stood out was when Joy Reid suggested she could just as easily question Piers Morgan about his own long-running public feuds. Notice what she was doing there. She wasn't changing the subject. She was highlighting something bigger. Every interviewer brings their own history, opinions, and biases into a conversation. The difference is that interviewers rarely become the subject themselves. Guests are expected to explain every past statement they've ever made. Meanwhile, the person asking the questions often gets treated as a neutral referee, even when they clearly have their own editorial perspective. That's worth thinking about, because media credibility doesn't just depend on asking hard questions. It also depends on applying those standards consistently. If one guest is expected to answer for every controversial statement they've ever made, then that standard should apply broadly, not selectively. Now, here's the part I think matters most. Political journalism works best when it helps people understand complicated issues. not when it encourages audiences to pick teams. Too much of today's media rewards confrontation over curiosity. The loudest exchange becomes the headline, the sharpest insult becomes the viral clip, and the actual substance gets buried underneath the spectacle. That's not healthy. Democracy benefits when interviews produce more understanding, not just more outrage. Whether you're interviewing a Democrat, a Republican, or anyone else in public life, the goal should be the same. Challenge the facts. Press for evidence. Expose contradictions. But don't confuse confrontation with journalism. Those aren't always the same thing. At the end of the day, you don't have to agree with everything Joy Reid said to recognize why this interview sparked such a strong reaction. Many viewers weren't just watching two people argue. They were watching two very different ideas about what political media should be. One built around confrontation, the other pushing back against the assumptions behind the questions themselves. That's why this exchange resonated, because it wasn't only about Joy Reid. It was about trust. Trust in the media, trust in political conversations, and trust that interviews are being conducted to inform the public rather than simply produce the next viral moment. If you enjoyed this breakdown and want analysis that goes beyond the clips to examine the bigger picture, make sure you like this video, subscribe to The Blue Lens, and let me know what you thought about this exchange down in the comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.